We're going to talk about how you can increase your leg strength as fast as possible. And we're going to start right now. The dude walks into your house and he holds a gun to your head and he says, you have 2 weeks to add 50 pounds to your back squat. And if you don't do this in the next 2 weeks, it's over. This is a real actual scenario that a weightlifting coach I used to coach alongside, John Bros, who actually won a $400 bet from. So John, if you're watching this, thanks for paying up for that bet back in 2017 with that Moser bet. Anyway, John would always put this question. He'd pose this question. If somebody came into your house, they said you got 2 weeks to get your squat up as fast as possible, what would you do? You know, you're not going to squat every single day. You're not going to go out and hit some type of squat set every single day, or are you going to try and think through some sense of periodization? And this is, you know, sort of the same principle. This is like the Bulgarian principle, right, around training and how we would be approaching this. And so what you're going to see in this video is we're going to talk about this specific story. We're going to go through the specific examples where I've actually tried this. I've actually used this story. Then we're going to break down a research paper that goes into actual people who volunteered to be studied squatting every single day to see what reaction they got and how many pounds or kilos they put on their lift. Okay, and then I'm going to help you guys with your own application, and we're going to tell you where you can go pick up a program to help you increase your leg strength. And of course, that's at peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store, or the Apple iOS Store. Peak Strength is our own strength training app. Now, this story, going back to the John Bros story, right? He was a big believer, big follower in the Bulgarian training system, and he would say essentially that you should be, you know, max snatching or going towards some type of max snatch or max clean and jerk on a regular basis. Same thing with the back squat or the front squat, depending, but mainly it was almost always the back squat, and you would work towards this max, and you do this every single day. And he would even refer to like the dark period, which I'll be honest, I'll be as clear on this as possible. I think he understands that period as well as anyone on the planet. Dr. B used to talk about that a lot. I've experienced it in that high frequency training. And so essentially you start to just do something every single day, all of the time. And I personally have done this with athletes in specific situations, which we'll get into and where you can apply this, but also for myself. I front squatted every single day for over 2 years, and I blew up my front squat to front squat 212, which is not huge, but a respectable front squat. Thank you very much. And I even at one point deadlifted every single day. I deadlifted 600 pounds for 12 days straight. I want to say it was 2018 or 2019. It's on my Instagram somewhere. To go through that, this is possible for even a lift like deadlift, that you can lift every single day. So I wanted to pitch that story, one, to grab your attention, but also to recognize that like there's a lot of people that are coaches that believe in squatting every day or snatching every day or cleaning every day. And it's not even just weightlifting. It's powerlifting coaches. It's coaches even in other sports that will talk about this. So fortunately, there's a research paper titled The Efficacy of Daily 1 Rep Maximum Training in Well-Trained Powerlifters and Weightlifters. This is a case study. And Mike Zordos was the main person behind this. And so we had broken down a bench everyday program or a bench everyday research paper. I thought, let's break this down because it's pretty cool. So the intro to this whole thing is basically just discussing that the human body will adapt specifically to an external stressor dependent upon the specific adaptations that are related to the demands, right? So in strength sports, this would be if you squat every day, bench every day, deadlift every day, weightlifting, clean and jerk every day, you know, specificity would be that you would have those specific disciplines improve. The thing I've always found interesting about that is that if they're so bought into the people who are squat everydayers, right? You know, someone back in the day, I remember Travis Smash was big into this as well. If you're so bought into absolute specificity, why do you back squat if you're a weightlifter? Because if you're so specific with your adaptation, should you even back squat? But in accordance with competition standards, individual lifts. Okay, so despite the ability of a strength athlete to apply the said principle daily, it's recommended that resistance training, the same muscle group, is performed 2 to 3 times a week. And this is where I think it is interesting if you're looking at stuff like this. The thought process, so in the age of science-based training, right? It's like, oh, well, you should only hit these muscle groups twice a week. And you don't need more than 10 to 12 sets for the week. And if you get anything more than that, it's a complete waste of time. And you're just sort of like negating anything technical that might happen. You're negating anything else that might occur that is outside the specific measurements that you're looking at. So we've got to be aware that there's a lot of things at play when you're training in a high frequency standard, right? Now, before we go further with the research paper, I want you guys right now to comment down below and comment if you've done a squat everyday program or a bench everyday program. Comment that down below. Yes, I've done it, or no, I have not done it. And then comment, I want you to do X experiment. I want you to do a sprint every day, or run 5 miles every day, or deadlift every day for 2 weeks and see what happens, right? Something like that. Comment that down below. Come up with some creative ideas and we'll think through. One, we'll be able to see how many people have actually tried this, but two, maybe we can get some crazy idea. Now, back into the powerlifting, weightlifting comps. Okay, they're only requiring 1 rep maxes, right? So the theory is that if they're only requiring a 1 rep max, that means we should just go to a max, and we might do multiple sets at a max and slowly build up for a back squat, a bench press, or a deadlift, or a snatch, or a clean and jerk. And we could do 5 sets of singles building up to that big time max. And so now that's the pitch. And then then the argument becomes, if there's some type of crazy reaction that could be, that could lead to some type of damage or fatigue, from that repeated stimulus here, then the body will ultimately recover. They'll have some type of resistance, and then during which an individual exhibits an enhanced ability to cope with the demands of the stressor. So actually they're saying here, when you train every single day with the exact same stuff, like all of a sudden you have this crazy super compensation, and the muscle group and the exercise just explode. Right now, the goal of this paper was to examine the efficacy of daily 1 rep max and volume training on the back squat, followed by volume sets of back squats. So they're looking at a little more than just that max out. They're looking at very similar to the bench press, where it's work up to a max and then do drop sets essentially. So, and they're going to see after 37 days what happens, right? So they go through and they get 3 male participants. So it's not a big study. Now, my debate here is that sometimes at papers like this, I actually think when you can really see like 3 to 5 people and that's it, it just, I know it sounds crazy, but the less people in this, the more believable I think it is, because you can really control and really see and really buy into these individuals. Like, you got to uphold this study. You got to go through this. That's just me. And I know it's totally anecdotal, but sorry, that's how I feel. So participant 1 was 28 and 3, 34, and they were competitive power lifters. And then the other one that was 19 was a competitive weightlifter. So number 2 equals weightlifter, right? 19, how good is his technique or her technique? I don't know. 1 and 3 had 10 years of experience. The other one only 5. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, they can look at here. We're looking at total body mass, right? So then we're looking at fat mass. Then we're looking at fat-free mass. We're looking at body fat percentage. We're looking at fat-free mass percentage. We're looking at lateral quadriceps midpoint, lateral quadriceps distal aspect, and anterior thickness. Okay, so we're looking at some pretty cool stuff. I wanted to point out here that participant 2, how were they getting this body fat percentage? Because that's pretty freaking low. And all of these dudes were pretty damn lean. Like, dude, lean. Okay, so the study was designed to examine the effects of daily 1 rep max back squat on their training. And so let's go is this where the methods are, the design objectives? Basically, they're looking at, does 1 rep max and doing those drop sets for muscular hypertrophy lead to some type of improvement in overall strength? Throughout the 30 days, 1 to 30 participants performed the 1 rep max squat, followed by 5 volume sets. The 5 volume sets consisted of either 5 sets of 3 at 85 or 5 sets of 2 at 90. Okay, they get 10 to 15 reps done. I would look at volume sets as like 5s to 7s. But that would be the way, that would be my argument. Day 31 began the taper period. So that's where everything gets decreased. And I want to point this out too. So in our system, okay, the system that we built peak strength on, right? We've got 3 types of peaking, and I love this, right? We'll have a classic taper peak where you just back off. We have a taper 2 weeks out peak, and then we have taper specific to the athlete, depending upon the lifts, depending upon load, very precise to specific athletes. Inside of peak strength, we're looking at, you could go into the powerlifting section, or you could be somebody who wants to, just become more athletic. You want to train like an individual who wants to be more athletic long-term. Let's say you're 25 to 30 years old and you're trying to be more fit. We create our own strength training system off of stuff like this, and it's the first link down in the description. So if you guys are struggling with a program, you're a little lost because you're watching all these research videos, you're like, what can I do? I want my squat to go up. I want to stop being small. I want to be athletic at the same time. Head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. The first 5 days is free. So you register, you fill it out, you select the sport, or you select the goal that you want to train for, and then you can get rolling. Now, on day 31 and 32, participants performed a 1 rep max followed by 3 volume sets. 33, 34, a 1 rep max followed by 2. Day 35 was 1 volume set, and day 36 consisted of a light session. That's pretty similar there on, I would say maybe a little heavy, but that would be pretty much 1 day out from a weightlifting comp. I would do this day. These other days are a little more aggressive than how I would want to peak somebody for a weightlifting comp. And I'm pretty good at peaking people for weightlifting comps, just so you know. Okay, so to complete the study, participants performed a post-test 1 rep max with no volume sets of the 37th and final day. Now, this is where the part I love. Before each session, they had 360 milligrams of caffeine powder. Dude, that's a lot of caffeine. And if we go back up to these dudes, so their total body mass was about, this guy right here was 64 kilos, and he was having 360 milligrams of caffeine powder. And he had it in his Crystal Light Energy. So he had it in, So 20 to 30 minutes later, they trained, and immediately following each session, they had their whey protein. Dude, so there's like specific principles you can follow for, if I was telling somebody to start taking caffeine, I'd start at 150 milligrams and slowly work up. So I know they've got to find a sweet spot. 300 plus. Whatever. These guys are ready to roll, right? Yeah, what was it again? 360 milligrams of caffeine powder. Straight up caffeine anhydrous. Let's get whacked. Okay, all 3 participants refrained from any additional exercise. Aside from they were allowed to bench or military press 2 to 3 times a week. And then they had to do 3 to 5 sets of 8 reps or 6 reps or 4 reps with an intensity of 8 on RPE or RIR. RIR is, I think, superior. Okay, participants refrain from exercise for 48 hours. Now, when they're going through this, right? So they're walking through, because I want to see what ends up happening. They're also looking at average velocity. They're using a Tendo unit to sort of determine that. They got the test at the beginning. So for each 1 rep max, they go through, they get the test. they go through, once they look at, I'm at a 0 RIR, I'm done. The lifter perceived that the load could be increased and a successful attempt would still be possible, and an RPE of 9 corresponding to 1. Okay, so they're basically telling them like what their perception is, and then they're looking at the average velocity, and then they're measuring, was measured during pre, mid, and post. They were estimated using the average sum of just 2 skin fold thickness measurements obtained from, so they took 2 things from the gut, 2 things from the thigh, 2 things from the chest. Maybe that would be better off if they went like another 3 or 4 spots. But still, not terrible. Daily perceived recovery was measured via the PRS scale. Muscle thickness. Okay, so here we get into the results. Well, let's look at the training history too. Each individual completed training. Absolute and percentage change was calculated for the squat from pre-testing to mid. And then they're looking at these guys and they're going, okay, the 1 rep maxes were broken up into quartiles. So they're looking at them in a quarterly basis, right? And then they're looking at how do they feel the day of their training, the day of the test without caffeine. So they're asking them all these things, no caffeine, okay, which I think is important. And then they get them whacked out of their gourd on 360 milligrams, okay? And then they start to warm up and they get through this and they got to, so this is the hard part, is like you're doing 5 doubles or 5 triples after a max at like 85, 90%. Dude, by day 25, you're just like, F this. Now, table 2 displays a pre, mid, peak, and post squat 1 RM for each. Okay, so we go through this and we can see the following changes we're seeing from pre to peak 1 RM. So in the first powerlifter, we see 12.5K or about 6%, 5.8. So dude went up and squatted 500 pounds. Now, this dude was squatting freaking 460 already, like already pretty, or 473, pretty damn good back squat, added 25 pounds. Dude, that's a nice squat though. Athlete 2, this was the weightlifter, and remember, 60 kilos, he's small, so like 140 pounds, 64K, 10.8% improvement of 13.5 kilograms. So now they're squatting over 300. So this kid was decent, like not great, but not bad. Jake, one of our weightlifters, was a 67, and he could back squat like 210. Jordan Wissinger was 67, back squat like 230, I want to say. So we're looking at this, like some of these dudes are pretty solid. And then athlete 3, a 21K increase, 9.5%, back squatted 220 in the beginning, and then hit 241, which is 531, 532. Pretty damn good. Peak 1 RM for the first athlete was day 35. Peak for 1 RM for 2 and 3 was day 37. Now, the interesting part there is, I want to get into the application, is like that changes, like that would change your peak. And that's where I love a study like this with just these 2 or 3 people, is like you can really figure out how they're responding on the day and change how you would peak them. Because in this case, one guy peaked when he still had more volume on him. The other 2 didn't. So that's like a very consistent thing that we see here at Garage Strength, where our athletes are training on site. We've got over 300 on-site athletes. So to peak people effectively, you've got to be in tune with this stuff. Relative strength increased from 146. So this is for person 1. I would assume person 2 won the pound for pound. Yeah, 9.9%. Dude, a 10% improvement. That's good. All 3 participants had significant and inverse relationships between daily 85% RPE and daily 1 RMs. However, only person 2. That's interesting. All 3 participants had significantly higher PRS scores immediately prior to commencement of training. So like right after they had caffeine, they were all like, yeah, let's go. I wonder if they were all training together. That was like, are they all in the same group? That's another question that I have. Interestingly, person 2 displayed a significant and inverse correlation between pre-caffeine and daily 1RM. So if he felt like crap, an inverse correlation, and then so if he felt really bad, the daily 1RM would be really high. Is that what that's saying? That's what an inverse correlation between and if he felt really good pre-caffeine, he'd have a bad one. That's another interesting thing. So that's the argument I make a lot of times with athletes, where I'm like, I know how you feel better than you know how you feel. And I know that sounds crazy, but there's a lot of athletes that will say certain things. And in a sport like weightlifting or throwing, you tell them a cue and you're like, they don't even know what they're feeling. Just do this. You're not feeling what you're actually thinking you're feeling, because you're not feeling it. So like, you're actually feeling the wrong thing, but keep doing that. It sounds really weird. Okay. So the primary aim was to just see these relationships, to see what would happen, to see how these things roll. And I think the big thing is I wanted to see this with the quarters, right? Because what bros would talk about, going back to that wild story in the beginning, like some guy comes in, let's say you got 37 days to hit a bigger squat. What are you going to do? You got to squat every single day. Otherwise you're going to get offed, right? And you can see that this dude pops off, okay? Goes up about a kilo, not a lot, but like goes up a little bit, but then goes up 6 kilos, okay? And then falls off. And so actually, when we've talked about this in the past, we've talked about athlete reactive analysis, and we've talked about athletes that drop down and then come back up. This dude is likely a type 3. Okay. This dude is likely a type 1. He goes 124 to 129 to 131 to 134, and then he goes up and hits a PR. This dude is probably also a type 3, has a little bit more of a drop off. Now, the other thing here, this dude was also heavier, so he's going to recover a little bit slower, but it's interesting to think through this. And the personality types, I would say participant 2 was a Zen, and then 1 and 3 were probably meatheads. This is what I love to see. This is fun, and you can just see the trend, going up and down. And then ultimately, what I wanted to see was where their body fat was, right? I want to look at like what type of weight loss did we see or not. So to our knowledge, the present study was the first to investigate the efficacy of daily 1 rep and volume training on max strength. So you're getting better in neuromuscular adaptations. You're recruiting a little bit more effectively. You're dealing with high stress on a daily basis. I actually think there's something to be said for executing something like this. We talked about this in our bench everyday study for the one that we did for our on-site athletes. And there's something that you buy into. And I've actually said this in past videos. We did a squat every day with some of our football guys. This is going back to like 22. 2 of them are Division I guys. One plays, just had a great game this past weekend against UMass. He squatted every day for 12 weeks and blew up his back squat over 500 pounds when he was in high school. And they became part of this, like it was like a club to be in the squat every day, guys. It's like this thing where it's like you're suffering, but you're suffering so much that you're in a group and it becomes cool. Okay, so in conclusion, performing daily 1RMs and volume back squat training produce robust changes in 1RMs for 3 competitive strength athletes. The crazy part I want to bring up right away. So this is like a little bit, we'll go back and forth between the conclusions and the application. Okay. The thing I love is these guys are pretty good athletes. The weightlifter's decent, not amazing, but solid. The other guys are solid. Okay. Pretty well experienced. And they saw 10% plus improvements. Now, the first guy only saw about 6%, but over 37 days. That's not a lot of time. So what is that? One, they're on a regimen, right? They're on a consistent plan. That's what we do for you inside Peak Strength. We hold you accountable in Peak Strength. Again, click the freaking link in the description, because the whole thing with you guys is you want to bounce from program to program to program instead of sticking to a plan over and over again. That's what these guys did. We saw great success here because they just stuck to the system consistently for 37 straight days. Now, I would want you to train for 6+ months and see long term what happens. The other thing here is I believe this is what happens too, is you get very consistent with a movement pattern and very dialed in with that movement pattern. You start to get very familiar. You like it. You feel good. You like to use it for mobility. And a lot of people, when I front squatted every single day for 2 years, I am now at a point where I still want to go in and front squat as my warm up because I'm so familiar with how I feel with that movement pattern. And I think that that's a really cool thing with the squat, with the bench, but more so with the squat, is I actually believe wholeheartedly squatting every day is really, really beneficial. Just as like, hey, just warm up with a bar on your back. You don't have to max. Just squat every day with a bar. Squat with your body weight. Squat, whatever it might be. And then finally, the one thing here with an application is like, we'll take athletes at certain points where we want to see a big bump in their back squat strength, and we'll squat every day. Okay. Or we get an athlete who's just stagnant and we'll be like, yo, we're squatting every day for the next 8 weeks. Or we have a weightlifter and they're 5 months out from a big comp, and we'll say, yo, we're going to spend the next 2 cycles squatting every day. We need your back squat to go from 180 to 210. And we're going to do that for the next 2 cycles. So those are ways that you can apply this and play around with it. In practice, a lot of these things are questions that come up. So let's see, they're unlikely that this type of training should be done year round, unless you're on drugs like the Bulgarians. More appropriate as a single intensity block. There we go. Furthermore, it is advisable that only lifters with multiple years of training. Yes and no. Yes and no. I think it's beneficial for some people to squat every day that are younger, especially if they're taller, front squat every day, because they just learn how to move with a squat, which is really hard when you're a taller, younger kid. I would argue that lifters, coaches must use appropriate discretion. So that would be my realm of application. I think this is an absolutely fun thing to look at. And I would make the argument, like, if you're further out from testing, right? I'm going to go back up to this chart where you guys could actually see here, post right here. The percent change seems off because it's saying like 11% change. Is that right there? But it's not, because this is 6.1 to 6.8. This dude was probably shredded. Also, what's crazy, just point out, this guy's legs actually got a little smaller in the front part of his quads. And about the same. Yeah, so just the front part of the quad. So if we're looking at like quad size for back squat, that's interesting. Now this dude is probably squatting high bar. Well, that's interesting too, even thinking that way. But these guys are pretty fit. Yeah, 16% body fat is pretty damn lean. That's probably where I'm at, around 15 to 16%, and then down to 12 is where you start to see pretty good six pack. 6%, you're diced. So going back over this, where, who could use this? Anyone who wants to have fun, right? You want to do an experiment, do this. I would start with back squats and front squats. I think deadlifts, you can do it, but I would also say, like, just be aware that, like, there's some days in a deadlift, squat or deadlift every day that you're just going to be gas. I would like the front squat and the back squat. The other thing that I say is set a time frame. Like, let's say 8 weeks, and you don't have to go 37 straight days, but instead you do the days that you train. Even on your upper body day, you squat to warm up, you squat to get to a point, and you work up to like 95%. The other factor here that there's a big benefit is, like, it's just about technique. And if you're snatching every day or you're cleaning every day, you feel that technique and you move more precisely. And that's also what you tend to see with the deadlift. Okay. Now, I also think that there's something to be said. I think the front squat's honestly the best one to do every day because it transfers to all these other exercises. And then the drop sets here are pretty tough. Now, 2 days a week, they were also doing other upper body type things. So the biggest way, the fastest way to answer the beginning, right? The fastest way to increase your leg strength is to hit high frequency training every single straight day for 37 days. Now, you also need to hit the mobility stuff. That's what we have inside Peak Strength. We've got mobility at the end of every single session. You got to warm up at the beginning of every single session. You hit the front squats or the back squats to start every single session, right? And to get rolling with it. And I think you're going to end up seeing that you will have a really, really fun time. There's going to be days that are miserable. There's going to be days that you might not even be able to, you'll fall asleep. You'll wake up in the middle of the night and you won't be able to fall back asleep. And then you're going to be really groggy in the morning. That will happen. Just try to persist and continue through. And the big thing that I think was something like a squat everyday program, you learn how to become a savage, dude. You learn how to get into the gym and you start to see training so much clearer because you're just much less of a pussy when you squat every single freaking day. That's the overarching lesson. So I hope you guys like this content. I hope you comment down below again if you've tried this, or if you're thinking about trying and you want to set this up, or comment about, hey, maybe you guys should try this, X, Y, or Z. Let us know. If you like content like this, click on this video right here, because remember, freaks, you better download Peak Strength. If you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.